Good evening, everyone. My name is Gretchen Bauer. I'm the Vice President of our association. Welcome to the 2023 Presidential Lecture. Tonight, I will be introducing our current president. Dr. Adérónké Adésànyà is an art historian of Africa and the African diaspora, an Africanist, artist, cartoonist, poet, and peace practitioner. She trained at the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, Nigeria, and the University of Ibadan, Nigeria. She holds a postgraduate diploma in peace and conflict studies from Uppsala University, Uppsala, Sweden, and a certificate in mediation negotiation from the Pan-African University, Lagos Business School, Nigeria. She is a fellow of the Codesria Gender Institute, Dakar, Senegal, and the Institute of Chartered Mediators and Conciliators, Nigeria, among others. She's a professor of art history at the James Madison University in Harrisonburg in Virginia. Her publications include Akinola Lasekan, Cartooning Art and Nationalism at the Dawn of a New Nigeria, Bookcraft 2020, Art, Parody and Politics, Africa World Press 2013, Carving Woods, Making History, Africa World Press 2012, Migrations and Creative Expressions in Africa and the African Diasporas, Carolina Academic Press 2008, and a co-authored poetry volume, Etches of Fresh Waters, Carolina Academic Press 2008. She has also authored several book chapters and essays in periodicals. Poe Trauma, Reflections on Nigerian NSARS and Other Traumatized Polities is Adésànyà's ongoing poetry collection. Her presidential lecture this evening is titled The Art in Our History. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you so much, Gretchen, for the generous introduction. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to this lecture, for creating the time. It's so much appreciated. Let me start with some nods to those before me, the past presidents of the association here present, previous board members, current board members, the executive committee, the executive director, Alex Saba, for the amazing work you've done and you continue to do for the association. This is what makes us, strong. This is what makes us, successful. This is what makes society progress. We're appreciative of the tremendous, input and contribution, both personal, financial, emotional sometimes, that you pour in to make us look good. Thank you so much. I also like to give a nod to my school, the James Madison University, Harrisonburg, Virginia, my college, the College of Visual and Performing Arts, of course, and then my department, and especially the Office of Research and Scholarship. The support, for me to get this far has come from various people. I include Dr. Anthony Tongen, and then Dr. Bessie Muhonja, Dr. Owusu Ansa, David Owusu Ansa. All these people have done tremendously well to support me in coming to the ASA. To my friends, there are so many friends that I have, allies, Uzena, even though, we work together on the committee, Didier, Okome, Ogundiran, Kiki, there's so many of you. And my sisters with Manifesto Diaspora, my sisters in session on JNU campus, my sisters here with Mia Shubiaro and Tufia, I forgot, the Mutia, I'm so sorry. You've all done tremendously well. And I'll acknowledge my daughter. My daughter would have been here today because I love toasting so much. She would have come, but she had surgery not quite, 3 weeks ago, and she's just recovering. Shout out to you, my daughter, where you are. You may be able to watch this. Love you tremendously. Before I go into my lecture, I'd like to make a request, because I don't want to forget it when I've finished speaking. I want to put it out there. Today, we are at this conference, the 66th annual conference. And it coincides, with so many things. I was born in 1966. Some people may not want, today. Yeah. So for 66, so I would like to request that members should donate $66 minimum and upwards to the development fund of the ASA. Please consider donating $66 at the minimum to mark this event. And you remember me, I was born in 66. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm going to look out, for your donations. Thank you. So let me get to the business of the day, the arts in our history. The subject of my talk emanates from old and new issues. They border on the importance of the arts, the visual arts, sculpture, painting, photography, film, and the performing arts, dance, music, theater, to our history. So I am here to consider the role of the arts in the history of humanity. Why should we care more about preserving and or repatriating where it is necessary the art forms to their owners? And why we must not stifle the humanities disciplines, but create avenues for creative work to flourish. Using childhood experiences, I will also offer some thoughts and anecdotes about art as the shaper of minds. These will be followed by highlights of the state of the arts, by extension, the humanities in the American Academy. The existential threats of artificial intelligence and the implications for society would also come on the front burner. I would then offer some concluding thoughts. The arts matter. The arts have played significant roles in our lives from antiquity to the present. Across the globe, sacred and secular forms served kingdoms and chiefdoms. They elevate elite spaces and give meaning to private and public institutions where they are housed and the teeming audience who view them. The arts do matter to gain insights into our cultures, to underscore human achievements, to celebrate and inspire people, and to enjoy the rich diversity of our world. When they are plundered, destroyed, burnt, displaced, dispersed, or devalued, they cause social disequilibrium and rupture human history. For instance, the burning of significant number of Duenfubara, which you see on the screen, Kalabari ancestral screen, and I'm happy, Dr. Ezelu, Ndubisi Ezelumba is right here, right in front. We've talked about this subject, many times, even when he visited my school. And the Mayan codices. I'm not getting okay, it's moving. Okay, perfect. The Mayan codices have left huge gaps in the history of the affected cultures and in human history. Garrick Braid, an iconoclastic Kalabari Christian prophet, destroyed the shrines and many of the iconic Duenfubara around 1915. Those that survived Braid's onslaught found their way into Western museums. A Kalabari screen, formerly on display at the Museum of Fine Arts, was deaccessioned on February 26, 2014, for transfer to the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I guess this occurred in the wake of the call for repatriation of African art. The damage done two centuries ago may be irreparable. The return of the objects to Nigeria will serve public good if it is carried out. The Maya codices suffered similar destruction during the Spanish onslaught in the early 16th century. Only 3 of them remain. They have survived. And the last four standing codices hold information about Mayan astronomy, astrology, religion, rituals, and their gods. Burning them wiped out important Mayan history, the Mesoamerican culture, and denies humanity the birth of knowledge about their capabilities and achievements. Add the Parthenon sculptures, stripped from the Parthenon monument in Greece to the list of plundered artifacts. Add the Benin bronzes that the British naval officers yanked from the Benin Palace ambience in 1897 to the list. The British Museum is arguably the largest center for looted or culturally displaced artifacts. Its controversial holding of objects belonging to other cultures taken in contentious contexts has been the subject of many publications. Of the lot, I want to reference Barnaby Phillips' publication, Loot, Britain and the Benin Bronzes, because the title amplifies the notoriety of the British Museum and the circumstances of the artifacts in its collection. The museum has tried to address its problematic position, including arguing that it is committed to be a world museum to explore the richness, diversity, and complexity of all human history and our shared humanity. The British government deflects and defers decisions on agitations for repatriation of cultural objects to the trustees of the British Museum. The trustees submit that they will consider loan requests. Greece and other affected nations and cultures consider this offer unacceptable. Successive Greek governments have refused to acknowledge the trustees to the title to the Parthenon sculptures. The British Museum's approach to dealing with affected nations is unequal. According to statements on their website, the museum maintains conversations with Greece over its Parthenon sculptures and collaborates with the Acropolis Museum. This differs significantly from the museum's approach to Nigeria and the Benin Kingdom, the owners of the Benin sculptures. Another disparity is that of the 50% of the original Parthenon sculptures that survive. About half are in the British Museum and half in Athens. Nigeria and Benin Kingdom have not been accorded such cordiality, mutuality, and any semblance of the shared humanity that the British Museum espouses. The display of the Benin bronzes like this one on the screen in this British Museum it's quite troubling. A number of times when I look at it, I think about barbecued meat. I think about that, because that's how you string meat or chicken or whatever it is that you want to barbecue. Time will not permit me to comment on several other cultural objects in captivity of Western museums and in the eye of the storm between nation states in global north and south. The list of cultural rupture is endless, and the debates over them continue. The pleas for the return of artifacts held captive in European museums reverberates, and mixed responses have greeted them. On November 28, 2017, Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, said, well, we should no longer keep artifacts that belong to other nations in our collection. We should return artifacts to sub-Saharan Africa. But some people feel that what Macron has said was quite untenable. Why should he want to give out the artifacts back to those nations? Nonetheless, Macron set a timeline of 5 years, which expired in 2022. France has since returned 26 artifacts that French troops looted from the Abomey Palace of King Behazin of Dahomey. The objects returned is a drop in the ocean, considering the Kimberley Museum alone, the fact that Kimberley Museum alone holds 70,000 African artifacts. In some other places, there are humongous numbers of artifacts belonging to Africans in captivity, so to say. The question remains, when are those artifacts going to be given back to their owners? One person, speaking loosely about the disappearance of any looted artifact from antiquity, said, and I quote, "They were meant to disappear." Julian Flack, the owner of a gallery, said, Africa is not ready for the responsibility of taking care of the artifacts if they were returned. Their views aired on Trevor Noah's program, The Daily Show, in a segment titled The Debate Over Europe's Stolen Artifacts. There were just so many things said. Noah said that the action should actually be berated, that we are actually still litigating the matter is an embarrassment. He berated the audacity and impunity of Belgium, for instance, in its neo-colonial decision to rebrand its colonial museum holding captive troves of African art into the African Museum. The Belgium decolonized, in quotes, truth-telling museum is now poised to recontextualize all the stolen African art. They are now exhibited with their context of acquisition, historical origins, and circumstances displayed with them. But does this transformation repair the colonial injury? An injustice done to the owners of the works? Not so. Change is mere semantics, and sugarcoating the injury just got salted. I will pose the question again. Are the arts still important to our existence? Our answers to the question will differ based on our experiences. Let me transition from the root ruptures of cultures in the colonial past to the experimental or experiential, how the arts empower the individual, how the arts shapes our minds. A child or an adult in the Western world may speak with excitement, recall and regale childhood memories of ways that the arts have helped in shaping their worldview, in building cultural knowledge and capital, and in developing selfhood and confidence. It is safe to argue that the status of anyone in the Western world does not debar any child or person in the global North from experiencing the arts, whether performing or visual. Art galleries and museums and theaters are within their reach. Entries to some of these spaces are free, others are not, I'm aware. Children can afford to visit the fee-paying ones. They can afford to visit the epicenters of the repository for the arts because they are integrated into parts of their curriculum. Holidays with parents or guardians are filled with travels to historic and memorable sites. They are not blindfolded by religious ideas that demonize or fetishize their cultural heritage. Living with the arts is taken for granted. It's considered part of their grooming. They connect with their ancestors through the arts. They glean cultural productions of different periods, and their achievements in tangible forms are right there in the museums and other cultural sites. Children in the global North seamlessly access the rich cultural knowledge of their society through formal and informal spaces. In contrast, children in Africa, except those from elite homes, do not have the latitude and luxury. For the indigent ones, access to galleries and museums are limited or non-existent. Where they exist, the ancient artifacts in museums collections are limited, as many have been dispersed abroad and are still held hostage behind glass cases. In foreign museums in America, where we are here, in Britain, in Germany, in France, and Scotland, among others. These are locations that the average African child cannot simply get up and go, pack up your bag and go. They cannot visit those places at will. Only children of African elites can step up into such spaces. Economic status determines who can get a visa from the embassies of countries holding African artifacts. In the current harsh economic climate, widespread across the globe, cultural tourism, enjoying the arts, are the least of consideration for the poor people, poor African parents. Even if they desire to give their children a robust, well-grounded grooming, many will rather devote their meager resources to existential concerns: food, shelter, clothing. Religious institutions, Islam and Christianity, also relegate and regulate the arts in the history of the African child. These religious bodies in Africa demonize ancient and traditional artifacts in their sermons and prayers. I have witnessed many times and listened to many examples to make this assertion. A child in the Western world can say amazing things about Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Apollo, Bacchus, or Venus. And especially, these are gods in the Western worldview. And especially if fabulous images, memorabilia, toys, comics, sci-fi movies have been generated about these gods. The children can speak excitedly about these deities to their parents or friends. Zeus is so amazing. Thor is terrific. And the parents are likely going to say, great job, Luke. Fantastic, Anna Mary. You know these iconic mythological figures by heart. Great job, good job. In contrast, let an African child as much as utter Shango's sculpture is so superb. The wand motifs are wonderful. Or say that the Ikenga statue is majestic. Or to gush over the Fang reliquaries. Or to gush over, Fang reliquaries, and you will hear a cacophony of disapproving voices of parents, guardian, or whoever is the adult gatekeeper of that house, binding and casting out demons that they perceive inhabit the mind of their child. So, the African child is taught to hate their heritage. They confront conundrums on many fronts. The goals of colonialism, imperialism, patriarchy, of capitalism, and religion hover over their pedestals of growth and pride. They hesitate to climb or transcend them. This allows disconnectedness. And those disconnected from their heritage, how would they learn about the grandeur of their ancestors and the cross-cultural correspondences that occurred across time and space? Or contemplate the possible connections between the silver nose covering of the fawn ancestor and nose, 2002, that work, the second work on the right, with gold-plated silver nose jewelry and sculpture. How would they make the connection that the works that this Dutch artist made could have been inspired by the fawn ancestors? How would they embrace and own the epic of Sundiata or the legend of their African ancestors? How would they, allow their imaginations to flourish, to go far afield? The refreshing views about Africa and the new African diaspora artists, such as Yinka Shonibare, Wale Lagunju, Wangeche Mutu, Sokari Douglas Camp, Magdalene Odundo, Amoko Bafo, Victor Epuk, and so many, Kweku Kwame, Lena Iris Victor, and many others, bring to global view and perspectives and refreshing ideas about Africa, and they help to soften the thorny grounds. They narrate self and others. They present Africa in bright lights and in conversation with other cultures of the world. They have sparked renewed interest in African art and are featured in major museums or art auctions. In the news, both print and electronic. The New York Times and the Washington Post provide interesting highlights about them. I derive so much joy in teaching my new African diaspora art course that I developed on these various artists that came from different parts of the continent and that have engagements with different parts of the world, whether Europe, America, Asia, and so on and so forth. They put Africa on the front burner. For instance, Shonibare, in one of his recent works, the one on the right, decided to sort of reclaim African sculpture and to reimagine them. He inserted images of African sculpture in his painting titled Modern Spiritual 2, knowing Shonibare for his tongue-in-cheek style of poking the other, the colonizer, or critics of African culture. The title of the work and the motifs in them speak volumes. They point to the African past, the present, and the future in paradoxically fixed and transcendental ways. Shonibare offers new modes of encountering and thinking about African sculptures. In another work, Sundance Kids, Shonibare spotlights the joy of the African child that many of us from the Yoruba world, and well, even those from other cultures, you can relate with. This is a typical African child's play. Ten, 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 ten. You play, you are excited, you're joyous. So it transports this work into other medium. This is something that another artist in Nigeria has also done, Adésolá Balogun. The sculpture on the left belongs to Adésolá Balogun. They address the same topicality. It's the play that allows the African child to be excited, to be joyous, to imagine self, and also connect with themselves. Cultural knowledge that are not policed for the African child, such as traditional stories, songs, poetry, pantomime, are accessed at the level of the family, communal, and cultural institutions. Others are disseminated through the electronic media, and so on and so forth. Children from poor homes often played on sandy or loamy soil. They got dirty in the process and returned home for lunch. Or dinner, they are exhausted, but they are happy. Unfortunately, bad leaders, multinational corporations, and property developers gawk at or colonize their happy places. Many of those playgrounds today are increasingly gentrified. As playgrounds transform into marketplaces, commerce trumps happiness of the underprivileged. Still, the African child's birth for life endures. They make their own toys, instruments, music, or art from improvised man-made natural materials. They harness their potentials amid scarcity, harness their joy where thorns threaten budding plants. Many of their bold ideas, performances are featured on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and talent shows. I'm sure many of you would have encountered them in such spaces. Let me briefly insert myself into this narrative. I was born in Kano, Nigeria. I grew up in northern and southern parts of the country. Maybe I should go back. I won't let you be viewing that work yet. I'm going to go back. Okay. My father was a Muslim, and my mother is a Christian. I did not experience any crisis of identity or censorship as it pertains to viewing or studying objects of antiquity or traditional art, though my exposure to them occurred later in life. In my childhood, I lived in various parts of the country due to the nature of my father's job. He was a district administrative officer of Electricity Corporation of Nigeria. It was known as ECN in those days, and later morphed into National Electric Power Authority, NEPA, and then Power Holding Corporation of Nigeria. Many Nigerians, have twisted those names, in very different ways based on the kind of services that this corporation provides to the country. And justifiably so, we twist those names. My father's elite civil servant's lifestyle. We lived in Kano, Jos, Lagos, Benin, Agbo, Uheli, Shagamu, Osho. I went everywhere because my father was always going everywhere. They afforded me the opportunity to visit places and to have a robust experience of Nigerian cultures. Though I did not visit any museum during childhood until my adult years and later in college, my life was filled with memorable sights and sounds of the creative powerhouses of Nigeria. Poetry recited by women in the family and at chiefdoms or palaces that I visited with my father awakened my creative consciousness. Live theater in my high school, at Baptist High School, Ede, was a common treat. I lived in boarding house and watched live performances of iconic figures of Yoruba theater, Hubert Ogunde, Duro Ladipo, Kola Ogumola, Ishola Ogunshola, and many others with their troops. Their production taught me Yoruba law and moray and expanded my knowledge about African cultures. My exposure was not limited to the theater. I also visited cloth dyeing and weaving centers in southwestern Nigeria. My memory of beautiful poetry rendered by great traditional poets at home and in the society, those that I was taught in school, and there were many, 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 spanning the African continent, most certainly inspired my love for and interest in writing poetry. Stage plays, adapted from the works of great African playwrights, Wole Soyinka, Chinua Achebe, Olarotimi, Amata Aido, and so on, grounded me in Africanity. I remember Anoa, I remember The Lion and the Jewel, I remember The Gods Are Not to Blame, and so many things. I remember songs. I remember a particular song. Tolani, Tolani, Temini, Temini, Sumomi, We Momi, Sumomi, Fa Momi, Yarabi Lole, Itole Domo. I cannot, I don't want to spend time interpreting that song for you, but it is so amazing. It is amazing. All right. I often imagine, though I had those robust experiences, but I still wondered how the impact of the Asian cultures, if I had Asian artifacts, if I had been exposed to them early in life, perhaps I would have included making sculpture, into my repertoire, because I make works of art, I paint, I illustrate, I make drawings, and things like that. But I learned their history first through the Western lens before I redirected myself through the familiar gaze and familiar passages of the producer cultures. I'm like many of my generations who, in their formative years, did not have the first encounter with great artistic legacies of Africa. Still, the nurture and culture of my upbringing put me on firm foothold in my diaspora location. America taught me blackness. African cultures nurtured my boldness. I've had catharsis moments before, during and after the COVID-19 epidemic. When life sings the blues to me, I spice it with jazz notes. My poetry and painting, now you can see. My poetry and painting are my own happy platforms. I switch from writing to painting to drawing. My studio in my house is in my basement, and my study on the topmost level of my home. Going to my studio when time permits is like dipping myself into a pool of renewal, like I'm doing, baptism, or dying to something in order to resurrect. And I find so many things that awakens me when I enter that space. I follow this ritual of dipping into the basement of my studio and resurrecting into my study upstairs as a practice. One of my paintings, which you see here, that I developed from ritual of the post-pandemic period, is the image that you see on the screen. The work also coincides with the George Floyd era, when racial tension was high. This work is titled Twisties, Twisted, Truncated. I reflected on the lives of Black women in America, Black sister, aunt, mother, daughter, friend, colleague, and so on and so forth, while developing this work. The figure is stoic. Her upper body transitions abruptly into her butt and legs. Her middle is missing. That missing part is a metaphor of an invisible scar, an incompleteness, owed often to microaggressions or race-based stress. Yet, the rest of her remains. In the face of various affronts and indignities, she, this monument of a lady, remains stoic, remains strong, and reminds me of Maya Angelou's words, "Still arise. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, arise." Angelou's poem reminds me of a Black sister like me, Phillips Whitley, a young slave girl who poured her experiences and pains into her poetry. She was the first Black female poet in America. I'm also reminded of Harriet Jacobs, who documented her life in Life of a Slave Girl. The sexual assault she suffered from her slave owner is quite horrendous. So she poured it out, writing, and had them published. The examples of these two women and several others show that art matters. They serve as catharsis and help people to transcend their job subjugation. Like them, this painting shows why art matters. It narrates the black girl women experience. The figure's braided hair, which flies in different directions, allude to unease, distress, or turbulence. Hair braiding requires some tension and taming. Structuring, or as they say, edge control, you tame it, to keep the hair in place, or as desired. The idea of taming aligns with how cultures try to control, regulate the female body. Being prim and proper comes to the territory of that gender. There's always an acceptable way to sit, dress, speak, gesture that is not required of a male gender. The figure's ties claps together, fulfills that norm. Body regulation affects all women under patriarchal system. It's not just black women. However, the control and scrutiny of the black female bodies is much higher. So in a way, there's resonance between taming the tangible, the twisted hair, and taming the body, wearing the coif. Between them, beauty is lost in translation. Twisted, one of the words in the title of this painting, recalls a braided hairstyle called twisted braid. Twisted applies to turmoil and restlessness, the burdens that black bodies bear each time their community is attacked, and so on and so forth. Now let me transition to another example of my work. I write poetry. And I'm not going to read that poetry because it's going to take time, but I have a short summary about it. The work is titled Stoic Highness. I developed it, around the time, Russia-Ukraine war, and then post-struggle, EndSARS, youth movements in Nigeria. There are so many things happening. And then African children who went to Ukraine to study, they were being displaced and dispersed to different places. And then women, the vulnerable children and everybody, they had this horrendous experience in trying to simply find a space for succor and all that. It was harrowing to watch the news during this period and to see in stark relief the inhumanity of humans against other humans. Voices shouted in vain against the acute discrimination against black bodies, most of whom the borders of Belarus and those of other nations proximate to Ukraine were shot against. The internally displaced, the distressed, and the hungry roamed aimlessly until some could find their way back home. The furious linear configurations in that drawing, because I always, accompany my poetry with drawings. As I'm writing, I'm doing the illustration that sort of reflect them. Sometimes it's the drawing that will lead to the poetry. Sometimes I'm just sitting and just, okay, something will strike me and I begin to pen that. So you have this raggedly looking woman at the center of this drawing, hauling loads along a pathway. She has a baby on her back. She's on a lonely road. She's lonely because help is not forthcoming, as was the case with many women, children, the aged, and so on, and even foreigners, just as we are witnessing in different war theaters of the world now. Israel-Hamas is another space. The wars in Niger. There's so many things happening. Women, young children, the aged, the physically challenged, and all that are the most vulnerable in this, war theaters, and they suffer a great deal. So you have this, as one of my experiences, how I pour things out and I, engage my art. Now, I want to transition to something else. We do memorials and all that. In grief, pain, depression, transitions, the arts still center us. This nexus informed the Kota reliquary and helped a society to memorialize their ancestors and forge continuity. That attachment is as inalienable as the one that this Nigerian American artist, Wale Lagunju, made with the painting on the right. Wale Lagunju's painting is about his mother that died in June. The mother died, and he decided to create a memorial. And this painting, of course, the painting may remain with him, or it may be bought. I guess, the artist would actually like to keep it. Grief is personal and communal. as is the case in Africa, it can be expressed in different ways. Dele Jagade's paintings, which you see over there, all those paintings are from the hands of Dele Jagade. They capture the angst and grief, a set of anomie that greeted the George Floyd floodgate in 2021. The outpouring of emotions by Black bodies and sympathizers was felt across the world. People were shell-shocked by police brutality and the injustice of killing a man in broad daylight. Jagade's art reminds us of the specific and the broader context of hate and violence in America and in other climes. We typically become sober in such moments. We hold our hands, we don't hardly speak, or we shed a tear or two. But in the ensuing weeks or months, things pan into the horizon. Time, like a tidal wave, takes the painful memory away until the mayhem returns. Today, Africa clamors for repatriation and transitioning. Clamors for the repatriation of the artifacts and restitution, not for mere vainglory, but for many other reasons, including ensuring that the African child sees what the ancestors produced and become inspired by them. While the dialogues and quest for these issues continue, significant groundwork is going on in Africa to bridge the gaps. Public museums, have increased exponentially across the continent since the pioneering ones were established. For instance, South Africa, the oldest museum and the largest number of museums in sub-Saharan Africa, with 300 powerhouses of history and human origins and advancement. Ghana has 28 museums. Nigeria has 53 national museums across the country and 100 more in the pipeline. So many. Kenya boasts of 22 museums, and we find museums in other parts of the continent, in Central Africa, in Congo, in Sudan, and all that. So those critics who talk about Africa not being ready to receive their artifacts, they are talking about situations 30, 40 years ago, and not talking about contemporary Africa. Good deeds worth mentioning are related to this conversation. And I'd like to point out the sacrificial and important monumental work that somebody in Nigeria did, Omobayemi Shilon, that's the person in the upper hand corner. He built a museum as a gesture to re-educate and redirect the Africans' attention to their cultural heritage. The Yemi Shilon Museum of Fine Arts, located in Pan-African University, became a university museum because that was how it was dedicated, allows opportunities to the Nigerian public, to children, to adults, to school-age people and all that, and foreigners alike, to experience Nigerian arts and contemporary arts of Nigeria and traditional arts of the country, and also arts from other parts of the continent. Nigerian children from various schools visit the museum and experience the arts in the way that their peers in other parts of the world now do. Shilon, a lawyer, an accountant, engineer, art collector, philanthropist, investor, adopts a multi-fold model, an intervention that gives multi-pathways to children and the youth in the country. It sponsors programs such as World of Art and Engineering and the Arts Today. So it sponsors those programs to open pathways for the youth to see roadmaps and not roadblocks to fulfillment in life. The model also underscores the reality of African art that ancient artworks were produced with remarkable technology, thereby learning about the processes and taking the knowledge further calls for STEAM. The African child is better positioned to become innovators and transformers if they learn about the technology that gave rise to the arts, if they learn about the arts and the material culture within their environment. Other important cultural institutions in Africa are the Pan-African Heritage Museum in Accra, Ghana, and the upcoming Edo Museum of West African Art, Moa, slated to open in 2025. They all point, to the direction of progress and development that Africa wants to go. They affirm the importance of the arts to African societies. As I redirect My discussion back to America, I want to ask the question again. Are the arts important to our existence? I will argue yes. However, the data points south in terms of governmental and institutional support for the liberal disciplines. The train heading south left the station over 4 decades ago. The devaluation of the humanities, of which the arts are integral parts, began gradually. What are the developments? What are the transformations and consequences? Why should we care? What can we do? Many questions that I'm hoping we will ruminate over, including some of the ideas that I will now address. I'm not the only person in this trajectory. I'm not the lone wolf hauling out the dangers of further devaluation of the humanities. It just happens that I have this platform today. What are the current threats to the academy? AI in the apocalyptic age. Much ado about AI. Studies have shown that the humanities, the arts inclusive, have been subject to progressive devaluation within the academic world and underfunding. The academics in the US and the UK began the stark example. Several humanities programs have been cut. Faculty development funding of the humanities is not quite robust today. Faculty scrap by to generate research or to deliver new content. By relegating the humanities to the lowest cadre in the academia, students are increasingly disincentivized to enroll to study them. The demand in the job market puts enormous pressure on funding legislation and determining the career paths that college graduates today want to pursue. What changed the fortunes or the trajectory of the humanities in the academia? Neoliberal policies, which, of course, the World Bank advanced as well and encouraged governments of different nations to say, oh, switch gear, move in the different directions. Several authors have pointed our attention to this fact when it began, and they explain how the World Bank implemented its political agenda to reform the university throughout the 1990s in several countries. Michael Gibbons, Chancellor of the World Bank, pitched the urgency of reforming the university to meet market demands, train human resources to fulfill the goals of transforming the economy. In the years that followed, these reforms, courses that respond to the new economy models, many rooted in information technology, took center stage in the academia. Individuals were required to master ICT to function in the new world order. They were challenged to be proficient in finding solutions to organizations' challenges. Higher education and research were outfitted to serve job market, and so on and so forth. I don't want to bore you with the details because you are very, very much aware. Here we are today facing multiple threats, notably underfunding, displacement and replacement, attacks on authenticity and infringements on the creative rights of people. As government underfunds the humanities, colleges move towards other direction. And then AI jumps into the fray. When AI jumps into the fray, you destabilize so many structures. We've seen how the effect has been eroding liberal education. Writers, artists, content creators face an uphill task to protect their work from AI cloning, poaching, and stealing of ideas. Research and society face existential crisis because of the changes AI has created, which those who profit from the technology believe are progressive. They believe, oh, it increases productivity and gives profit. We are forced to devote attention and resources to technological innovations, focusing on adapting work and everyday life to technologies including AI. AI is AI, summing the beginning and the end. For me, I say artificial intelligence is apocalyptic implosion. Humanity signing up to annihilate themselves. Society is at peril for neglecting the humanities that are the backbone of our existence and wholeness. We neglect the very things that heal us, make us civil, empathetic, loving, caring. Humans are made to connect, be communal, to touch, to share, to flourish, and not to be embodied by automation, robotics, machines, and so on and so forth. To be clear, emerging technologies are great, fabulous. They make our work easier, they make us do work faster, They generate many ideas and all that. However, they cannot replace the human touch. Technologies are enabling tools. They are not replacement tools. That's what they are becoming today. We face a conundrum in the new tool, artificial intelligence, that aims to drive the economy. We have been following and or exploring this tool. We have also been monitoring the unfolding consequences. It's paradoxes. It's fast and fatal, familiar and alien, friendly and deadly. As many reviews would attest to, despite its many benefits, AI is a present danger to humanity. I collected some observations and research evidence reported in the news. Society now grapples with the epidemic of loneliness. On Michael Smerconi's program, Smerconish on CNN, I learned that AI girlfriends imperil a generation of young men, particularly in America. People are choosing AI girlfriends over real persons. Data indicates that 63% of young men and 34% of women are single because technology, the social media, and the rising use of AI reduces the opportunity to connect, to socialize, and have relationships. Single men are not seeking human partners. 1 in 5 American men are not in any relationship. Masculinity is under attack. Women are also being replaced and repressed. Humanoids are increasingly unleashed on a society not prepared for the imminent displacement. On November 13, 2023, you can see I always check the news on this trend. I'm always, doing an update as if I'm really, really hooked up, to, finding out these consequences. Esther Perel, while speaking with Christine Amanpour on CNN, the Amanpour Hour, gave some stunning remarks that Amanpour classified as revolutionary. Perel tackles the intersections of technology, loneliness, and love. She argues that the possibility of social atrophy and that humans will eventually become something else if the current climate of epidemic of loneliness is not apprehended. We can live without sex, but we cannot live without touch. What put humanity on this dangerous precipice that Perel describes? These are the loss of social capital, the lack of people to talk to during crisis, more virtualization of everyday life, people having virtual sex instead of physical intimacy, less friendship translating to alienation, more hostility, depression, ideation of violence, or suicide. Studies show that there are many people with no close friends, and their population have quadrupled since the 1990s. The data is staggering. All these alienating scenarios create greater danger for society. Perel further states that when humanity miss touch, or they avoid touch, or even congregating, meeting together and things like that, we become irritable. Little wonder that we're having so many conflicts all over the place. Because people are not relaxed. They're not going to theater. They're not spending time together. They're not telling stories. They're not enjoying music. If they enjoy music, it's on the go, at a flash. You do everything, with very little attention to really decompress and enjoy and soak yourself in the wonderment that all these, arts provide to us. All the experiences, such as humanoids, robotics, bots, cloning, automation, and other stimulations outside of the human contact zones, are disembodied experiences. Virtualization of our lives is a disembodied version of our lives. It is not fulfilling. To halt the crisis, Perel says that humans must meet, go dancing, watch movies, be sensual and sexual with each other. And then Amanpour says, are we becoming a different species? Perel thinks we have reached the level of transhumanism. The humanities are not optional and avoidable or an affordable luxury, as some critics will have us believe. What we do as humanities scholars and in our classrooms could not be more relevant to the world today, nor could they be more practical in terms of the skill we need as 21st century citizens and beyond. The humanities are a necessity, and not only from a utilitarian perspective, but for a more holistic perspective. We cannot surrender our future that fixates on a narrow economic conception of what is productive and useful. What about our responsibility to nurture our individual capacity for creativity and artistic expressions? Are they not crucial measurements of our worth, of our success, and wealth as human beings? We should never undervalue the personal fulfillment that can be derived from literature, art, music, theater, philosophy, religious studies, history, and so on and so forth. An appreciation of our diverse cultural legacies enriches our lives. Individuality, collective interactions, and then the same is true of becoming actively involved as participants in the creation of new cultural forms. Newness, not reproducing what is already existing or cloning them and using machines to churn them out as if you're in an assembly plant. There must be new ideations, things that are generated outside of machines. As a growing body of research demonstrates, cultural vitality and personal happiness ultimately leads to economic growth. So even those who want to make money, they can make money by ensuring that humans are ready to really create, have an explosion of creativity. I will want to just simply move to my concluding thoughts. I want to, compress this. My concluding thoughts are mainly propositions. In Africa, the arts cannot be consigned to the back burner. And we can see the way that people have, consciously, tried to ensure that there are spaces to enjoy the creative, enterprise. While we advance in training and innovation in our technological developments, we should also pay attention to the arts. This guarantees a holistic development such that current crisis of neglecting the humanities happening in the developed societies do not affect the African nations. In America, the alarm bells are already sounding the various manifestations of mental health. I'm not going to play that. And health outbreaks. I'm sorry. I can't go back to it. Okay, I want that. In America, the alarm bells are already sounding in the various manifestations of mental health outbreaks, in the escalating widespread gun violence, in the epidemic of loneliness and epidemic of mental health. The statistics are staggering. Top US officials recently met at Dartmouth College, Hanover, New Hampshire, to reflect on the public health crisis in America. And they blame COVID-19 pandemic, they blame social media, they blame technology, and they blame uncertainties about the future. A review of their meeting held on the program meeting of the Minds revealed grave evidence gleaned from a recent survey. It shows that more than 40% of college students are dropping out because of mental health and emotional stress. Some of us in our colleges, we know how some of these are reported. More than 42% of high schoolers say they constantly feel sad or hopeless. That figure is more than 15% of what it was in 1999. More than 41% of college students reported overall depression and suicide ideation. Similar submissions were made at the opening of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee held with Vivek Murthy, the US Surgeon General, in June 2023. To they wanted to hear positions, current updates about youth mental health crisis in Nigeria, and what they found out was damning. While the health intervention, which this body's meeting may propose, is very great, and the various interventions that are being used, I want to suggest a radical intervention. We must redirect the socialization of our children and youth, and this must be funded. It's not going to come out of the blues and things like that. Let there be a national rescue fund for the humanities, since the humanities have been so neglected. National Rescue Fund for the Humanities and the Arts, called NAFA. I put the acronym. This is not a replacement of NEH. NEH funding grants and all that can be there. But this special one should be dedicated and allocated to universities, high schools, elementary schools for content, to develop content for therapy and care, wellness for the people. Asian cultures used music, theater, dance to heal disorders in the past. That's what they did. In Greek world, theater was both for entertainment and healing, music and all that. So why can't we introduce that as part of the therapy processes for people? We can do similar things at this critical time because medication is not resolving the mental health crisis in America. There can be different ways of administering the NAFA funds. Institutions can deal with it at a granular level. However, one of the key programs must be that schools must enforce that people have arts break. Maybe 1 hour, maybe 2 hours, and they cannot be committed to be, okay, you want to earn credits because you want to take art grades. It must be free of all encumbrances. Just let them go and enjoy and relax. Don't bother them with any assignment or it can choose to listen to music, they can choose to watch theater. Just create that as part of the curriculum. The arts break could be for 1 hour or whatever they want to decide that to be. No assignments, nothing, just let them do. They can do a concert, a poetry jam, a debate, or any other creative endeavor of their choosing. Their academic work must be halted during arts break. Let them be human. Be human first. It reminds me of what Beyonce just said. I think I saw it just yesterday. Say, oh, people should learn to be free, to feel free and all that. Maybe she's just trying to respond to whatever is happening in the society. You may ask, where is the funding going to come from? If you say, oh, yeah, create, national endowment, for National Rescue Fund for the Humanities and the Arts, where's the money going to come from? Who are the potential contributors to such an enterprise? I say include it in the federal and state government budgets and request donations from billionaires. Billionaires can go to space. They can do all kinds of things. Let them bring their money. And corporations, let them, devote some funding to it. If they can develop policies to fund science and technology, if they can do space tourism, they can fund this process. They can. They can. To the global community, it is high time we realize again that the arts do matter. Paying attention to this reality and creating policies that rescue the arts and the humanities, making restitutions, repatriating artifacts, and restoring the human dignity of cultures harmed by past actions is basically a responsible step towards a shared, safe, and sane humanity. In closing, I enjoin you to follow the cue from these Fang and Gabonese figures frozen in time. Let us go dancing. Thank you so much for your attention.